Hello, my friends. Welcome to Origins. What a privilege to have you with us today. You know, Origins is a forum where we take the evidence of science and we use it to validate the truth of creation. Today we have an exceptional guest with us, a really unique man, a special man of God. And I'm so honored to have Dr. Jerry Bergman with us. Dr. Bergman, it's so good to have you.
Thank you.
Tell us, though, first of all, about your personal story.
Well, my personal experience was I was a professor at Bowling Green State University in Ohio. And because of my doubts, now at that time I was an atheist coming out of atheism and exploring theism. And at that time I began to have more and more questions about Darwinism. And my colleagues were not very happy where I was going. And I was openly terminated because of my doubts about Darwin.
No question about why. There was no subterfuge. It was, you're going to be a creationist, you're not going to work here.
I had a dozen signed notarized affidavits from my colleagues stating that this was the reason. And I also had, we eventually ended up in court, and the testimony was very, very clear. They had very concerns about my questions about Darwinism, and they were suspicious that I might have taught creationism. Now, I didn't, because I didn't teach in that area at that time, but that was their concerns that they expressed.
Now, you know, I was in college in the late 60s and early 70s, and as we were burning, I wasn't, but as I was watching on the news and they were burning down an administrative building, the huge issue was academic freedom. And I bring this up because I think a lot of our viewers will be shocked to hear that there isn't the academic freedom for creationists and for Christians that there is for people who don't believe anything, is there?
Right. There's a very defined academic freedom. Some people have it and some people don't. And it happens those who question Darwinism. And let me define Darwinism, because a lot of people use the term evolution, which there's no question it occurs, such as evolution of dogs. We know that occurred because, of course, we did it. So evolution occurs, which just means change, genetic change in an organism. But what we mean by Darwinism is from molecules to man, or from the goo to you by way of the zoo. Now that's poetic, but on the other hand, that really epitomizes what we're talking about when we talk about Darwinism. And many of the people in my book had no problems with evolution. In fact, some were evolutionary biologists. The problem was Darwinism, what I often call dogmatic, fundamentalist Darwinists.
So you're talking about microevolution and macroevolution. Are those terms helpful?
That's another way. Those terms are commonly used in the literature, yes, and those are appropriate.
So one is within the species,
right,
and the other is trans-species.
Right, and we understand now more about microevolution because of the field of epigenetics. So we understand how
you
genes...
have to define that word.
Epigenetics is where genes are turned on and off, and the environmental factors influence which genes are turned on and off. And so therefore, we now realize that the environment has a fair amount of influence upon the development of organisms.
All right. Now, let's go back to your issue. What brings the change to becoming a theist and a Christian?
More and more questions about Darwinism. The key to atheism is Darwinism. If Darwinism is true, therefore we have no need for a creator, because natural forces can create everything.
I think this is very significant. So it was your scientific research that brought you to theism. It wasn't that you had an experience with Christ and then started to doubt Darwinism.
Right, it was the opposite.
Yes, you said, this isn't working, so I have to look for another answer.
Right, I was convinced that Darwinism simply was not true based on science. Science, not religion, but science.
That's very significant. And then you began to do research and find out that you weren't the only one this had happened to.
Right, when I was terminated, my case got a lot of publicity in various newspapers, magazines, on TV, and so on. Christianity Today had an article, and other sources. And I began to receive phone calls, letters, and other communications, and I realized this was not rare at all, that this had happened to many, many people. So I began, just for curiosity, just exploring what happened to other people, and I began to file information. And I ended up with 4 file cabinets full of documentation about this happening to other people. So I finally decided, well, why don't I put this in a book form? Why don't I summarize these cases?
I want our people to understand, this is not some little tempest in a teapot that 2 or 3 people this happened to at a bad experience with an individual college. You're seeing a national trend here that transcends the local university.
A very strong trend. In fact, I found very few cases of people who were openly questioned Darwinism who ended up with tenure or with their jobs. Now, if they already have tenure, then their job is more secure. But I found it's very difficult to get tenure if you question Darwinism.
That's really scary to me. Where do we go with this?
it's getting worse and worse. And I'm working on a case now called the Freshwater case. And he got into trouble, as well as other people who teach at his school, for using words such as faith. For one case where a female science math teacher, her husband would give her notes every day, and she would bring these notes to school, like a birthday card. And on the notes, he would have a scripture. And she was told she's not allowed to display this on the desk of her classroom. And so I see more and more hostility against not just Darwin doubters, but also against people who are openly religious.
Now, not all colleges are the same. As you've done your research, there's a progression of where the prejudice becomes more severe.
Right. Community colleges and technical colleges, the problem is least serious, partially because technical and community colleges are concerned about training people to do things. They're very pragmatic, very oriented toward the job market. The problem is worse in four-year colleges, and the problem is by far most severe in research colleges, which offer graduate degrees.
And why is that, sir?
I think because research colleges, they're more interested in theoretical ideas. They're more interested in philosophy, in where you're coming from. Whereas the technical colleges are concerned about, can you do something?
Right.
Can you fix a car? Or can you do accounting work?
But the higher up you go, and the more you're getting into a position where you can actually affect the culture or affect the worldview from which the scientific community works, the more stringent the scrutiny becomes.
Right, and the more concerned they are about what you personally believe.
Right.
Which in the cases I included in my book, all of them got in trouble not for what they did, but for who they are and what they personally believed. And that was very clear in my research.
I don't know how this affects our viewers, but this sounds so terribly un-American to me. It seems like this should be the country where we have freedom to discover truth, wherever it's coming from.
I agree. I've concluded that what we have now is literally a hate movement against people who question Darwinism. And it's becoming more and more vicious, and this is why I'm coming out with other volumes which document indeed how it's getting worse and worse, it seems, by the year. By the way, my book, which Slaughter the Dissidents, it is highlighted in the film Expelled. And in this book, there's, I don't know, about 12 cases, and I documented most of them extensively in my book.
Now that's Ben Stein's film, a movie was in the theaters, Expelled.
Right.
No intelligence allowed. Now
Right.
maybe, Dr. Bergman, what you need is a pair of short pants and a pair of tennis shoes, and we'd be able to promote this better. But it's fascinating to me. Now Ben Stein, if I understand correctly, is not a Christian, is that right?
Right, he's Jewish, as were several people in his film. By the way, the Darwinists, the fundamentalist Darwinists, do not tend to discriminate religiously. They equally dislike Christians, Jews, and Muslims.
Well, that's good to know, I guess. Dr. Stein, known prominently in the nation, and he is seeing the same concern. He's addressing the same concern you are.
Right, he was. And one major way that they attacked the film Expelled was to say these people were not let go because indeed they doubted Darwin. They were let go for other reasons. Well, I've spent a huge amount of time exploring most of the cases in the film Expelled, and I concluded there's no question. Clearly, they were let go because of their doubts about Darwin. And so the basic conclusion of the film, I support fully. And this is why I concluded that it's unlikely an out-of-the-closet Darwin doubter will survive in academia today. And that, to me, is the antithesis of science. Science should be open-minded, allow one to explore all avenues. After all, science is often defined as truth, or science is what scientists do. What scientists do is try to find out reality in the world out there. And when you start blocking off avenues of research, that's a big problem.
That's right. In the academic community is the place where there has to be freedom to discover. And that's the very place. You're saying in military, government, and industry, it's not a big problem. But in the place where there should be the most freedom is where we have the least freedom.
Exactly. And I've looked for cases actually in the military and government and so on, and I found close to zero. There's a couple of cases in government, one case in industry, no cases in business. Virtually all, well, 99% of all the cases that I documented that I could locate were in academia. So that's where the problem is in academia. And the main problem, as I stress, is these are fanatical Darwin fundamentalists, and they are in many ways what they call true believers. I've tried, because I love to talk about this, obviously, and I've tried to talk to my opposers, because I need my critics, because bounce ideas off me and I off them, and that's how one grows. Criticism is critical in science.
Absolutely.
You must have criticism. And I've tried to do this with many of my critics, and you can't talk to them. They get very emotional. They start to use obscene language. They lose it. And this surprised me, shocked me for academics and scientists. This is not my image of a scientist at all until I, of course, discovered this. Now, in most other areas, I don't have any problem.
Right.
We can debate other things and have very good conversations.
And
but
why
once
is
this
that,
comes
sir?
up, you've got a problem.
Why?
I think because this issue strikes at the heart of our worldview.
That's right.
And therefore, when I question Darwinism, I'm questioning their whole worldview.
It's a clash of worldviews, isn't it?
Clearly, and that's why they get so upset. That's why their emotions are so much a problem.
Now, you say that often you're attacked not for what you've taught or done, but for who you are, what you believe. Is that right?
Right. They don't like you as a person. At Bowling Green, it was very clear that they had no evidence that I was proselytizing. But they said they were suspicious I was, and therefore, if I was, then that's a justifiable reason to terminate somebody.
Oh, that's scary. Really scary.
Yeah, it is. And that was true. I thought I was the only one. But in all the cases I looked at, from the research I did, the same thing was true in every single one of these cases.
Okay.
So in academia, they tend to stress what you believe and not so much what you can do.
All right. Now, there's the statue of Darwin with Ben standing in front of it. They won't stand any critiquing of evolution?
Right. In the cases that I looked at, they were not teaching creationism or ID, but what they were doing was critiquing evolution. And that's what they got in trouble for.
Doesn't that sound terribly defensive?
Oh, yeah, very much so. But they feel critiquing evolution implies the other side, and the other side is creationism or intelligent design.
Do you think that's because we have questions they can't answer?
Oh, I'm sure that's part of it, because if they could answer them, they would. But often they can't answer them, so therefore the anger, etc., comes up. It's often said if you have an answer, you answer it. If you don't have an answer, you hammer on the person.
That's right.
If you can't hammer on the person, you hammer on the table.
Yeah, pound
and
the
that
table.
I found this is very true in this area.
You use the word slaughter. Is that too extreme a term?
A number of people told me that that's too off the wall.
Yeah.
And when they reviewed the book, I got back with a number of these people, and they said no, when they read the book, it wasn't. Because what happened was these people not only lost their job, but they often lost their career.
Yeah.
They lost their family. Many ended up divorced. A number became truck drivers, which is fine, but
think of that.
You got 9 years of training, enormous amount of expense, $300,000-$400,000 to get through a 9-year PhD, bachelor's, master's program. A lot of money, a lot of time, your career's ended. This is devastating for a lot of these people's lives.
So we have PhDs driving trucks because the same reason they were let go at one school is going to keep any other school. Once you're out of the closet, you're not going to get hired to teach science.
Right. They say it's the kiss of death in academia.
So what's your advice to a creation scientist who is teaching in a university right now?
Stay in the closet.
Stay in the closet.
By all means, stay in the closet. Now that's hard. Because
Yeah.
when I mention that at various places I speak, people say, well, how can I sit there and allow people to say things where I believe are wrong? And I have evidence that they're wrong. Well, until we have clear protection. Now, one state does have protection. That's Louisiana. Louisiana has a law which says you can criticize Darwinism. And I think Minnesota is another state that has a similar law. The solution is basically we need more legislation which says we have the right to criticize Darwinism.
Okay, we've got to take a break right now. We'll come back in a minute and talk about, Dr. Bergman's talking about legislation and other things that we could do to perhaps stop the slaughter of the creation scientists in the academic community. You'll want to know how we can help, so you stay with us. We'll be right back.
Creation versus evolution. You weigh the evidence. The human body. Complex circuitry. The human nervous system is the most remarkable electrical communication center ever designed. It regulates the action of organs, monitors the senses, and controls one's thinking, learning, and memory capacity. The trillions of computations required for such coordination of complex circuitry is enormous. The truth is that scientists are constantly discovering that our nervous system's intricate workings are nothing short of a miracle. Today's guest on Origins, Dr. Jerry Bergman, is the author of several books, including Slaughter of the Dissidents, Killing the Careers of Darwin Doubters, and Persuaded by the Evidence. For book orders, go to Amazon.com. Dr. Bergman has presented over 100 scientific papers at professional conferences, has over 800 publications, and is a frequent guest on radio and television programs. Dr. Bergman is also a professor at Northwest State College in Ohio, where he teaches biology and chemistry courses. For more information about our guest, you can write to Dr. Jerry Bergman at Northwest State Community College. His email address is jbergman@northweststate.edu.
We are back with Dr. Jerry Bergman, and we're talking about his book, The Slaughter of Dissidents. And we've begun with his own personal experience of being a professor at Bowling Green University. And as he began to have doubts about Darwinism, he was released from his position as a professor there. As he began to do research, he found out he wasn't alone. And over the last 30 years, he's documented over 300 cases where people have been persecuted. I think that's the right word, Dr. Bergman, because of their belief, not even their belief in creation so much as their doubt of Darwin.
One case which shows the trend is, and I found no exceptions, by the way, there are 4 or 5 cases, but this case is typical. Moore versus Gaston Board of Education, and Moore was an atheist. He taught Darwinism theory as fact. He said Adam and Eve were false. He told the students the Bible is wrong. There's no life after death. There's no heaven or hell. The Adam and Eve story is false. And there's few students that didn't appreciate that. So he ended up in court, and the court ruled the students have a right to hear all points of view. Well, actually, that's what the court ruled, but in fact, the court said they have a right to hear only the atheistic, agnostic, anti-Christian point of view. They do not have a right, other courts have ruled, to hear the other side. So indeed, what we have now in our schools is an indoctrination against Christianity and against theism. So you can teach against Christianity, the Bible, and creationism and ID, but not in favor of it. And this is very, very consistent, by the way. And the courts have ruled this because they've ruled creationism is religion, and even when you criticize Darwinism, they have ruled that that is in the back door teaching creationism. So if I point out problems with Darwinism, that is what they call backdoor teaching of creationism. And we, in essence, have a state-enforced religion today.
Now, use the word religion for Darwinism. Help us with that. In what way is Darwinism a religion?
Because Darwinism is a worldview. It explains where we came from. Religions also explain where we came from. Religions also explain why we're here. Darwinism also explains why we're here. We're here, by the way, according to Darwinism, to reproduce and carry on the species. We're survival machines.
So a worldview, religion is in essence a worldview that explains the meaning for life and the purpose for life, and for the secularist, Darwinism does that.
Right, and where we came from and where we're going.
Yeah.
Both religion and Darwinism does that.
Okay.
Okay, and people lost their careers again for who they are, not what they did. And the evidence was that I could not find any evidence that any were teaching creation or intelligent design of these cases that I researched. In fact, a number of people said they were fearful that the teacher would not enthusiastically push Darwinism, and therefore were let go.
So that's the job description of every science teacher in a university in America, is to enthusiastically push Darwinism.
Yep.
And if they don't do that, they're not doing their job.
Right, and even if they use articles from journals such as Nature and Science, they got in trouble, which is ironic. And this is a good example. Gamero Gonzalez, he believes the universe had purpose, and that was the end of his career at Iowa State. And they focused, his colleagues focused on that word purpose. In the criticism, which was online and also was in email communications, this was the reason they were so concerned, that he believed the universe has purpose. And of course, scientists says the universe has no purpose except survival.
So we are so huge proponents of random chance without meaning that if you teach purpose, you're in trouble.
Right. Yep, you're in trouble.
I think that's incredible.
Another case, Roger DeHart, he was forbidden from using articles from various scientific journals. And again, he was critiquing Darwinism. An excellent teacher, won all kinds of awards. And when they found out he was critiquing Darwinism, he was eventually drowned out. And basically, I see this amounts to indoctrination.
Yes.
How I feel it should be taught is students should understand the issues. I'm not saying religion should be taught. I don't think we should teach religion in a science class. We need to give them all of the information so that they can understand the problem. And by the way, surveys have found when this is done that students learn not just the other side, but they also learn evolution better.
Sure.
Which makes sense when you teach both sides. In fact,
teaching people to think rather than indoctrinating them is always a good idea.
It's always much better, right. It's always much better. Example would be, does the fossil record support gradual change? Well, you can say that. Does the fossil record support rapid or abrupt appearance? Well, if you say that, you could have a problem. But the fact is, the fossil record, in almost all cases, supports abrupt appearance. That's just a result of looking at the fossil record, which I've spent a fairly large amount of time doing. Okay. Evolution is rarely defined, and again, I'll stress, my definition is from the goo to you by way of the zoo, or from molecules to man. It's important when we talk about creation, evolution, to define what we're talking about, because often we talk past each other because we are not using the same words in the same way. And the problem is not survival of the fittest, but the arrival of the fittest. There's no problem with the fact that obviously if you're more fit to survive, you're going to be more apt to survive. Survival of the fittest is clearly true. No one doubts that. That's like saying rich people have money. Of course they do. The problem has always been, and still is today, the arrival of the fittest. That is what Darwin tried to answer, and other theories have been developed, like Gemmell's theory, pangenesis, orthogenesis, Lamarckianism. All of these have been ruled out now by science, so we're back to this position we were before. We really have no adequate theory which explains the arrival of the fittest. Mutations is most commonly utilized, but there are a lot of problems with the mutation view. My conclusion is censorship hurts science. And from my own research of the science, I've concluded evolution never occurred, could never have occurred, and this conclusion is based on science. It's not based on religion. My feeling is the truth will come out eventually. It just may take longer.
And it's going to take longer because we're not having a discussion. We're not having an exchange of ideas where the truth can surface. Darwinists, you say, can fire us, deny us tenure. They can take away our degrees or keep us from getting degrees. Is there any light at the end of this tunnel, Dr. Bergman?
I think the solution is that we need to encourage legislation that allows us to critique Darwinism.
So we're not going to win at the schools, we have to win in the courts.
I think the courts are the only way that we're going to prevail, right?
Okay.
And the schools in many ways are in between. If they go one way, they can end up in trouble. If they go the other way, they can end up in trouble. So we have to have clear legislation and clear court decisions which allow the schools to permit teachers to critique Darwinism.
What can we do?
Be aware of what's going on. Talk to your congressmen, talk to legislatures, talk to senators, talk to people who can influence legislation, try to get letters in the newspaper, encourage debates. I was scheduled to debate Richard Dawkins last year, and he, unfortunately, when he got my resume, he emailed the organization which was setting up the debate, which was an atheist group in Indianapolis, and he said, nope, I'm not debating Bergman. So it's hard
because you know too much. You have too much information.
It's hard to get people to debate this, right?
Okay. You know, I hope you're upset enough at the end of this program to write to your legislature and say, how would we get legislation that would ensure, first of all, that we don't kill practical and precious scientists who can make a big difference. And I also hope that you'll want to be involved in such a way that the truth of God's Word can again be instituted into the teaching of our colleges and seminaries, or our colleges and universities, or we're not going to have a future as a nation that's going to have scientific advancement. This is such an important program. I hope you'll get involved. And I hope you'll remember that while we're in this debate, it's God's view that He created you. That should be your worldview too. We owe a great debt to men like Mr. Bergman, Dr. Bergman, who've paid such a price. And I hope you'll be involved in supporting them as well. And so I hope we'll see you again soon here on Origins. God bless you till then.
thank you for watching this edition of Origins. If you'd like a copy of the PowerPoint information presented today, you can download a PDF file of program number 912 from our website at www.originstv.org. Or for a DVD of this series, send a $12 donation to cover shipping and handling and write to Origins, program number 912, Cornerstone Television, Wall, Pennsylvania 15148.
Origins is made possible by the faithful prayers and the financial support of you, our Cornerstone Television family.